Hey, I wanted to show you something here. I suppose the title of this will be Tone Enhancement of Drums, in parentheses, artificially. I have a friend of mine who I've been sort of given pointers, I suppose, who's new to. I use Cakewalk, have for about 20, maybe even over 20 years. And we're talking about drum tones, and the subject came up, and I haven't seen anybody else really do anything exactly like this. Let me jump right in. In context of a song, I have I just worked up a real quick mix of the drum kit. I usually start with overhead and room. It should be said that I always bus the drums to its own bus. So right now I don't have anything on it. It's just kind of back. We can read you. Hopefully you can hear that. We're not receiving telemetry. The stars, the sun, and the moon. So I start with overhead and room. And nothing special, just pretty flat. And let's just solo up the drum bus. I start with the overhead and room to get it to sound 77% there. And I gradually will pull in the close mics for articulation. So I said I was going to solo the drum bus. Just this drum bus here. Okay. Without trying to get too specific to my tools and my platform, I'm going to show you the concept. So the kick, as you could hear, maybe let me just solo the kick for a second, is pretty dry. It's more for articulation. Like I said, I try to get stuff out of the overheads. Not sure that's going to be loud enough for you, but let's go ahead. That's the kick. Okay, that's the kick. Let me show you the snare. So I have pillows on two heads. It's pretty dry. It's about the pop of the articulation, but there's no tone there, which I generally like to have tone. Depends on the song. Here's the snare, and it's a similar story here. Let's go to a part where you can see the snare. So again, that's a pretty dry, you can hear it's a close mic snare. Not a whole lot of dynamics to it. It's about articulation because in the context of the room and the overhead mics, it's just about the articulation. But what I'm missing is tone. Now, I didn't record a good tone, but how can I get the tone? Here's sort of the point of this whole video. I want to add tone. So I've done two things. One, I've created a sample of a snare. Basically, I have another snare with a lot of ring on it. I turn the snares off. I don't know if you can see this, but I'll do a rim shot. And I'll record that. And then I'll enhance it. I've even messed around with tape speed and EQ and compression to further enhance it. So I want to add that to the snare. Let's start with the snare. So let's just go. This isn't a real great example of a song because it's not snare heavy, but let's just do the snare before. And here's the snare ring. I'm just going to slowly bring it in. Well, let's bring it right here. Here it is. Here's the snare ring by itself. Now I should also say I shape the transient of the ring to not be so. It's a slower attack, so the wave would maybe like a few milliseconds to maybe even like 30 milliseconds. It doesn't attack right away. You hear how the ring comes up a little bit later. And that's being, there's a couple of ways to do this. Cakewalk has something called drum replacer, which is a misnomer. It's not really, well, you can use it to replace your drums, but how I've used it is I've mixed in things like this to the existing snare. So let's just go to a part I can see the wave there. I'm going to turn it way up. So I'm artificially adding that snare to this. So before this ring, with the ring. Now I would dial it back a little bit. So you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide this sample as a download. You can go, I'll post a link that you can download it with this. Let me zero in on it. With just this sample. And you can hear the brush a little bit because but that little ring, you add that, you trigger that. There's also some free drum triggers out there that maybe I'll see if I can find a link and post that too. But adding this to a regular snare hit is the difference between this that little, here, let's go right here. Now with the ring. Too much, so I'm going to pull it back. So, and in context of the whole kit, whoops, let's undo. So I think I like the tone. Now, the kick. Let's solo up the kick here. The kick, as I showed you earlier, is real dead, real for articulation purposes only. So I made this sine wave. I'm going to provide this for you too. What I did was I used a donationware synth called Helm, and I took a sine wave that starts off about maybe 55 cycles, 55 hertz. And at the beginning of this, here, and this is what it sounds like. This is what it sounds like when I'm done. But it starts off with at about 55 cycles and envelopes down over the course of this, which is probably, let's see, 0.7 to 1.8. So almost a second long. And it starts here at about 55 hertz, and it goes down here to about maybe 40 hertz. This is what it sounds like. Man, let me turn it up. If you have to use headphones to hear this. It's so low. So yeah. And the other thing, I'm shaping the transient. Let me zero in on it. You see, it's not a big pop. It doesn't start off high and go down like the other, the kick that I recorded. It ramps up over a few milliseconds. So it ramps up in the first few milliseconds in amplitude and volume, and then it tapers off in volume. But it also starts off at 55 hertz and goes down to 45 hertz. Or no, it's more like 65 hertz, I think. Yeah. So let me show you what that will do to the existing kick. Let's go to a part. I'm going to mute the sine wave that I'm triggering with my existing kick. So here's... And I'm going to pull in the sine wave. I'll exaggerate it. So now we've created a synthetic tone for the kick drum. So let's just do the drum bus again. This isn't by any means. Oh, I should have told you this earlier. It's a good point now, and going back to why I like to do drum buses. All the drums go into the same drum bus. It's because I love the Ringo sound when he hits a kick and a cymbal at the same time. How it has that whoosh, that the energy from hitting a kick drum and a crash cymbal at the same time clamps down on the volume of the cymbal, and it has that kind of like doing a cannonball coming off the high dive, the whoosh thing. So I'm just gonna dial up a quick compressor on the full drum mix. Let's activate it. Let's listen to the whole drum mix right now. And if you, I'd have to find a crash with a kick, but set the threshold a little higher. Yeah, there's one. Whoops. Where was that crash? Let's make the threshold a little. Let's up the ratio. Let's overdo it. It's not grabbing it quite the way I want it to right there. But that's not even the point of this video, so I'm gonna revisit that a little bit later. Anyway, so let's listen to that kick tone and the artificial tone and the artificial snare tone in context. Let's listen to everything. Perfect, but oh, Columbia, come back. It isn't perfect, but could be worse. Can you confirm you're on the road? Loneliest So I guess that's about it. I'm going to give you these two samples so you can experiment on your own. Hope that was useful.